In the heart of Nigeria, nestled among lush green hills and winding rivers, lay the sleepy village of Mubi. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the rhythms of daily life flowed as steadily and predictably as the nearby river Yedzaram. The villagers lived simple lives, their days marked by the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of the seasons, and the occasional excitement of a village festival or celebration. Among the inhabitants of Mubi was the Okafor family. They lived in a modest compound on the outskirts of the village, close enough to hear the bustling sounds of the market on busy days, yet far enough to enjoy the serenity of the surrounding nature. The family patriarch, Mr. Patrick Okafor, was a well-respected figure in the community. A teacher at the local school, he was known for his stern demeanor in the classroom, but his kind heart outside of it. As the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Mr. Patrick stirred from his sleep. He rose quietly, careful not to wake his wife Kioma, who lay peacefully beside him. With practiced movements, he prepared for another day of molding young minds at the village school. In the adjacent room, Femi and Fumi, the Okafor twins, slept soundly, oblivious to the world awakening around them. At 22 years old, they were no longer children, yet they clung to the comforts of youth with a stubbornness that both amused and frustrated their parents. As Mr. Patrick stepped out into the cool morning air, he paused to survey his modest kingdom. The compound was small but well kept, with a small vegetable garden tended lovingly by Chioma. He sighed, his thoughts turning to his children. While he took pride in his work as an educator, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment when he thought about Femi and Fumi's lack of direction. "Good morning, my love," Chioma's soft voice interrupted his musings. She emerged from the house, already dressed for her day at the market. "You're thinking about the twins again, aren't you?" Mr. Patrick nodded, his brow furrowed. "I worry about them, Chioma. They're good children, but they need to find their path in life. They can't keep sitting around doing nothing forever." Chioma placed a comforting hand on her husband's arm. "Give them time, Patrick. They're young, they'll find their way." As the couple shared a moment of quiet understanding, the twins in question were still lost in their dreams, blissfully unaware of their parents' concerns. It wasn't until the sun was high in the sky that Femi finally stirred. He stretched languidly, his tall frame taking up most of the small bed he shared with his sister. Beside him, Fumi grumbled and pulled the thin blanket over her head. "Wake up, Fumi," Femi said, giving his sister a gentle nudge. "It's almost midday." Fumi's response was a muffled groan. "Leave me alone, Femi. There's nothing to wake up for anyway." Femi couldn't argue with that. Their days had fallen into a monotonous routine of eating, sleeping, and occasionally helping their mother at the market or their father at the school. It wasn't that they were lazy. They simply hadn't found anything that ignited their passion or gave them a sense of purpose. As Femi dressed and stepped out into the compound, he was struck by a sudden restlessness. The day stretched before him, empty and uneventful. He needed something, anything, to break the tedium. "I'm going for a walk," he called out to no one in particular. His mother had already left for the market. His father was at the school, and Fumi was still in bed. Without waiting for a response, he set off towards the outskirts of the village. His feet carried him along familiar paths, past the small farms and homesteads that dotted the landscape. The sun beat down mercilessly, and soon Femi found himself covered in a sheen of sweat. Almost without conscious thought, he directed his steps towards the river. The river Yedzaram had always been a source of life for the village of Mubi. Its waters nourished their crops, provided fish for their tables, and offered relief from the relentless heat. As children, Femi and Fumi had spent countless hours playing on its banks, splashing in the shallows, and dreaming of the distant lands the river might one day carry them to. As Femi approached the river, he was struck by how little had changed. The water still flowed serenely, the reeds still swayed in the gentle breeze, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds and insects going about their business. For a moment, he felt like that carefree child again, with the whole world stretching out before him full of possibilities. Without hesitation, Femi stripped down to his shorts and waded into the cool water. He sighed with relief as the river enveloped him, washing away the sweat and dust of the day. He swam out to the deeper part of the river, reveling in the sensation of weightlessness. As he floated on his back, staring up at the cloudless sky, Femi felt a strange tingling sensation. At first, he dismissed it as a fish brushing against his leg, or perhaps a stray water plant. But the feeling persisted and intensified, until it felt like a gentle but insistent tugging. Curious and slightly alarmed, Femi righted himself in the water, treading to stay afloat. He looked around, trying to identify the source of the sensation. The river appeared calm and undisturbed, with no sign of anything unusual. Just as he was about to dismiss the whole thing as a product of his imagination, something broke the surface of the water a few meters away. Femi blinked, sure that his eyes were playing tricks on him, for what he saw was not a fish or a bird or any other creature he recognized. Instead, he found himself staring into the most beautiful face he had ever seen. It was a young woman, or at least the upper body of one. Her skin was a rich, deep brown, glistening with water droplets that caught the sunlight like tiny diamonds. Her hair, black as night, fell in wet ringlets around her face and shoulders. But it was her eyes that truly captured Femi's attention. They were large and almond-shaped, with irises the color of the deepest part of the river. A blue so dark it was almost black. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, equally surprised by the encounter. Then, to Femi's astonishment, the woman smiled, revealing teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp to be entirely human. "Hello," she said, her voice as melodious as a mountain stream. "I don't think I've seen you here before." Femi opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. For as his eyes traveled down from the woman's face, he realized with a jolt that where her legs should be, there was instead a long, powerful tail covered in iridescent scales. A mermaid. He was looking at a mermaid. "Are you all right?" the mermaid asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "You look a bit pale." Femi shook his head, trying to clear it. I'm fine," he managed to stammer out. "It's just, you're a mermaid." The mermaid's laughter rang out across the water, light and musical. "Ha ha ha. And you're a human," she replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I'm Adana. What's your name?" "Femi," he replied automatically, still struggling to process the situation. "Femi Okafor." Adana smiled again, and Femi felt his heart skip a beat. "It's nice to meet you, Femi Okafor. I hope I didn't startle you too badly. We don't often reveal ourselves to humans, but, well, I was curious." As the initial shock began to wear off, Femi found his voice again. "I didn't know mermaids were real," he said, then immediately felt foolish for stating the obvious. Adana didn't seem to mind. She swam a little closer, her movements graceful and fluid. "Tch. Oh, we're real all right. We just prefer to keep to ourselves for the most part. The surface world can be dangerous for us." Femi nodded, remembering old stories his grandmother used to tell about magical creatures and the perils they faced from humans. "I can understand that," he said. "But then, why did you show yourself to me?" Adana's smile turned shy, and she looked away for a moment. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "I've watched you humans from afar for so long, always wondering what it would be like to talk to one. And when I saw you swimming, I don't know, something just felt right." As they continued to tread water, facing each other, Femi felt a connection forming between them. It was as if the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just the two of them suspended in this magical moment. "Tell me about your world," Femi said, eager to learn more. "What's it like under the water?" Adana's eyes lit up at the question. "Oh, it's beautiful," she said enthusiastically. "Imagine vast underwater forests of coral in every color you can think of, and some you can't. Schools of fish that move like one giant shimmering organism. Caves that glow with bioluminescent algae. And my people, the merfolk, we live in a great city built into the side of an underwater mountain." As Adana spoke, painting vivid pictures with her words, Femi found himself captivated. The world she described seemed so far removed from his own mundane existence in Mubi. He hungered for more, asking question after question about life under the sea. In turn, Adana was just as curious about life on land. She asked about the village, about Femi's family, about the strange objects humans used in their daily lives. Femi did his best to explain, often stumbling over his words as he tried to describe things he had always taken for granted. They lost track of time as they talked, laughing at each other's misconceptions and marveling at the differences between their worlds. It wasn't until Femi noticed the sun beginning to dip towards the horizon that he realized how long they had been there. "I should probably head back," he said reluctantly. "My family will be wondering where I am." Adana's face fell for a moment, but she quickly masked her disappointment with a smile. "Of course," she said. Will you come back tomorrow?" Femi didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," he said, grinning. "Same time, same place." Adana nodded eagerly. "I'll be here," she promised. As Femi swam back to shore, he couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, filled with a sense of wonder and excitement about what the future might hold. Little did he know that on the other side of the village, events were unfolding that would soon threaten his newfound happiness. Elder Marcus sat in his compound, his weathered face creased with concern. Across from him sat Elder Chidi, equally troubled. Between them lay a small pile of fish scales, unlike any they had ever seen before. The scales were large, almost the size of a man's palm, and shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. "These were found on the banks of the river," Elder Chide said gravely, "near where the young boys like to swim." Elder Marcus picked up one of the scales, turning it over in his gnarled hands. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "Not in all my years." "There are stories," Elder Chidi said hesitantly. "Old stories passed down from our ancestors. about creatures that live in the water, half human, half fish. Elder Marcus nodded slowly. Mermaids, he said, the word heavy with implications. But they're just stories, surely. Elder Chidi gestured to the scales. Then how do you explain these? And the reports from the fishermen of strange sounds coming from the river at night, of glimpses of something that's neither human nor fish. The two elders fell silent, contemplating the gravity of the situation. If there truly were mermaids in their river, it could mean trouble for the village. In all the old stories, encounters between humans and merfolk rarely ended well. We need to investigate further, Elder Marcus said finally. Discreetly. We can't afford to cause a panic. Elder Chidi nodded in agreement. And if we confirm that there are indeed mermaids in our river, what then? Elder Marcus's face hardened. Then we do what we must to protect our people, he said grimly. Even if that means eliminating the threat. As the elders made their plans, unaware of the budding relationship between Femi and Adana, the stage was set for a conflict that would shake the village of Mubi to its very foundations. Meanwhile, back at the Okafor compound, Fumi had finally dragged herself out of bed. She sat in the shade of a large mango tree, idly plaiting her long hair as she wondered where her brother had disappeared to. It wasn't like Fumi to be gone for so long without saying anything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Fumi's concern grew. She was about to go looking for Femi when she saw him approaching the compound, a strange expression on his face. "Where have you been all day?" she called out as he drew near. "Mama was worried sick when she came back from the market and couldn't find you." Femi seemed to snap out of a daze at the sound of her voice. "Oh, I went for a swim in the river," he said, his voice oddly distant. Fumi raised an eyebrow. "All day? Must have been some swim." Femi just shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It was refreshing," he said cryptically. Before Fumi could press him further, their mother's voice rang out from inside the house. "Femi? Is that you? Come inside this instant." Femi winced, knowing he was in for a scolding. He shot Fumi a pleading look. "Cover for me," he whispered. Fumi rolled her eyes but nodded. She had always been the more responsible twin, often covering for Femi's occasional misadventures. But as she watched her brother hurry into the house, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. There was a light in Femi's eyes that she hadn't seen in years, a spring in his step that spoke of more than just a day spent swimming. Inside the house, Kioma was waiting, her hands on her hips and a worried frown on her face. "Where have you been, Femi?" she demanded. "I came home, and you were nowhere to be found. No note, nothing. I was about to send your father out looking for you." Femi hung his head, looking appropriately contrite. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said. "I went for a walk and ended up at the river. I lost track of time." Chioma's expression softened slightly. She reached out to touch Femi's cheek, her maternal instincts overriding her anger. "You're sunburned," she observed. "And you smell like river water. Were you swimming all this time?" Femi nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He hated lying to his mother, but how could he possibly explain what had really happened? Chioma sighed. "Well, at least you're home safe," she said. "But don't you ever disappear like that again, do you hear me? This village may seem safe, but there are dangers out there you don't know about." If only she knew, Femi thought. Out loud he said, "Yes, Mama. It won't happen again." As Kioma bustled off to prepare dinner, muttering about irresponsible children, Femi retreated to the room he shared with Fumi. He flopped onto his bed, his mind replaying every moment of his encounter with Adana. A mermaid. He had met a real, live mermaid. And not just any mermaid, but the most beautiful, fascinating creature he had ever encountered. He closed his eyes, picturing Adana's radiant smile, her melodious laugh, the way the sunlight had danced on her scales. "All right, spill it." Fumi's voice interrupted his reverie. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing look on her face. What really happened today? Femi sat up, considering his options. He and Fumi had always been close, sharing secrets and dreams since they were children. But this was different. This was magical, unbelievable. Femi hesitated, torn between his desire to share his incredible experience and his instinct to protect Adana's secret. He looked at his twin sister, seeing the mixture of concern and curiosity in her eyes. "Fumi," he began slowly, "if I tell you something unbelievable, do you promise to keep it a secret?" Fumi's eyebrows shot up, but she nodded solemnly. "Of course, Femi. You know you can trust me." Taking a deep breath, Femi launched into his tale. He described his swim in the river, the strange sensation he had felt, and then Adana. He spoke of her beauty, her grace, the mesmerizing sound of her voice. As he talked, his eyes lit up with excitement, his hands gesticulating wildly. "Though..." Fumi listened in stunned silence, her eyes growing wider with each passing moment. When Femi finally finished, she sat down heavily on her own bed, shaking her head in disbelief. "A mermaid?" she whispered. "Femi, are you sure? I mean, mermaids aren't real. They're just stories." "I know how it sounds," Femi said earnestly. "But I swear to you, Fumi, it's true. I saw her with my own eyes. I talked to her. She's real, and she's amazing." Fumi studied her brother's face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She had never known Femi to lie, especially not to her. And there was something in the way he spoke about this Adana that rang true. She had never seen him so animated, so full of life. "Okay," she said slowly. "Let's say I believe you. What are you going to do now?" Femi's face lit up. "I'm going to see her again tomorrow," he said. "I promised I'd go back to the river." Fumi frowned. "Femi, be careful. Even if she is real, you don't know anything about her or her people. What if it's dangerous?" "She's not dangerous," Femi insisted. "You should have seen her, Fumi. She's kind and curious and I think she likes me." Fumi couldn't help but smile at the hopeful look on her brother's face. It had been so long since she'd seen him truly excited about anything. "All right," she said. "But I'm coming with you tomorrow." "What? No, you can't," Femi protested. "It's not up for debate," Fumi said firmly. "If you're going to be meeting a mythical creature, you need someone to watch your back. Besides," she added with a grin, "I want to see this mermaid for myself." Before Femi could argue further, their mother's voice called them for dinner. As they made their way to the small dining area, Fumi squeezed her brother's arm reassuringly. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Your secret is safe with me." Dinner that night was a subdued affair. Mr. Patrick, tired from a long day of teaching, ate in near silence, occasionally glancing at his children with a mixture of concern and resignation. Chioma, still upset about Femi's disappearance, kept up a steady stream of chatter, filling the silence with village gossip and mild admonishments. Femi barely touched his food, his mind still at the river with Adana. Fumi watching him closely, covered for his distraction, deflecting their mother's questions and keeping the conversation flowing. As they were clearing the table, Mr. Patrick finally spoke up. "I heard some strange rumors at the school today," he said, his deep voice serious. Everyone paused, turning to look at him. It was rare for Mr. Patrick to engage in gossip. "What kind of rumors, Papa?" Fumi asked, curiosity piqued. Mr. Patrick frowned, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Elder Marcus and Elder Chidi were at the school today, asking questions about the river. They seemed concerned about something." Femi felt his heart rate quicken. Could they know about Adana? "What were they asking about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "They wanted to know if any of the children had seen anything unusual in the river lately," Mr. Patrick replied. "Strange creatures, odd lights, that sort of thing. They were very insistent that if anyone saw anything out of the ordinary, they should report it immediately." Chioma clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Those old men are always stirring up trouble," she said. "Probably just trying to scare the children away from swimming in the deep parts of the river." But Femi and Fumi exchanged a worried glance. They both knew this was more than just an old man's fear-mongering. That night, as the twins lay in their beds, the compound dark and quiet around them, Femi whispered, "Fumi, are you awake?" "Mm-hmm," came the sleepy reply. "I'm worried about Adana," Femi confessed. "If the elders find out about her." Fumi propped herself up on one elbow, looking at her brother's shadowy form in the darkness. "We won't let anything happen to her," she said firmly. "We'll figure this out together, okay?" Femi nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for his sister's unwavering support. "Thanks, Fumi," he murmured. As they drifted off to sleep, neither of them could have imagined the events that would unfold in the coming days, events that would change their lives and the life of their village forever. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the air already heavy with the promise of another scorching day. Femi woke early, his excitement making sleep impossible. He lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of the compound coming to life, his father's heavy footsteps as he prepared for another day at the school, his mother's soft humming as she started the morning meal. Beside him, Fumi stirred and yawned. "What time is it?" she mumbled. "Early," Femi replied. "But I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Adana." Fumi sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "All right, lover boy," she teased. "Let's get going before Mama ropes us into chores." They dressed quickly and quietly, slipping out of the compound just as the sun was peeking over the horizon. The village was still mostly asleep, only a few early risers stirring as they made their way towards the river. As they walked, Fumi peppered Femi with questions about Adana. What did her tail look like? How did she breathe underwater? Did she eat fish? Femi answered as best he could, realizing as he did so how little he actually knew about the mysterious mermaid. When they reached the river, the water was calm and still, reflecting the pink and gold of the sunrise like a mirror. Femi led Fumi to the spot where he had met Adana the day before. "Now what?" Fumi whispered, looking around expectantly. Femi shrugged. "I'm not sure. Yesterday, I was swimming when she appeared." "Well, go on then," Fumi said, giving her brother a gentle push towards the water. "I'll keep watch from here." Femi waded into the cool water, his heart racing with anticipation. He swam out to the deeper part of the river, treading water as he had the day before, Minutes passed, and there was no sign of Adana. Femi began to worry. What if she didn't come? What if yesterday had been a one-time occurrence, never to be repeated? Just as he was about to give up and swim back to shore, he felt it. That same tingling sensation he had experienced yesterday. A moment later, Adana's head broke the surface of the water, her brilliant smile lighting up her face. "Femi," she exclaimed, "you came back." "Of course I did," Femi replied, grinning. "I promised, didn't I?" Adana's eyes sparkled with joy, but then she frowned, looking past Femi towards the shore. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice tinged with alarm. Femi turned to see Fumi, standing at the water's edge, her mouth agape as she stared at Adana. "It's okay," he reassured the mermaid. "That's my sister Fumi. Well, I told her about you. I hope that's all right." Adana hesitated, biting her lower lip nervously. "I'm not supposed to reveal myself to humans," she said. "My father, the king, he forbids it. He says it's too dangerous." "Fumi won't tell anyone," Femi promised. "You can trust her, I swear." After a moment's consideration, Adana nodded. "All right," she said. "Bring her out here. I'd like to meet her." Femi waved to Fumi, gesturing for her to join them. Fumi, still wide-eyed with amazement, waded into the water and swam out to where Femi and Adana were treading water. "Fumi, this is Adana," Femi said, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. "Adana, my twin sister, Fumi. It's an honor to meet you," Fumi stammered, still staring at Adana's otherworldly beauty. Adana smiled warmly. "The honor is mine," she said. "Femi told me so much about you yesterday. It's nice to finally put a face to the name." As the initial shock wore off, Fumi's natural curiosity took over. She began asking Adana all the questions she had peppered Femi with earlier, and many more besides. Adana, for her part, seemed delighted by Fumi's interest, answering each question patiently and often asking her own in return. As they talked, Femi found himself falling even deeper under Adana's spell. Her laughter, her grace, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her underwater home, everything about her fascinated him. He barely noticed the time passing, lost in the joy of this magical encounter. It was Fumi who finally brought them back to reality. "Femi," she said, her voice urgent, "the sun's getting high. We need to get back before Mama and Papa start wondering where we are." Femi looked up, startled to see that the sun was indeed well above the horizon. They had been talking for hours. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Adana asked, a note of pleading in her voice. "We'll try," Femi promised. "But we might not be able to stay as long. We don't want to make our parents suspicious." Adana nodded understanding. "Be careful," she said. "And thank you, both of you. It means more than you know to have friends from the surface world." As they swam back to shore, Femi's heart was soaring. Fumi, however, wore a troubled expression. "What's wrong?" Femi asked, as they dried off on the riverbank. Fumi sighed. "Femi, this is dangerous," she said. "You heard what Adana said about her father forbidding contact with humans. And remember what Papa said about the elders asking questions. If anyone finds out about her..." "They won't," Femi said firmly. "We'll be careful. We have to protect her, Fumi. You saw how amazing she is." Fumi nodded slowly. "She is incredible," she admitted. "But Femi, what's your endgame here? She's a mermaid. You're a human. How can this possibly work out?" Femi had no answer to that. The reality of the situation, which he had been steadfastly ignoring, came crashing down on him. Adana lived in a completely different world. Literally. How could he hope for any kind of future with her? As they walked back to the village, both lost in thought, neither of them noticed the figure watching them from the shadows of the trees. Elder Marcus narrowed his eyes as he watched the twins disappear down the path. He had seen them swimming far out in the river, apparently talking to someone or something in the water. His suspicions confirmed, Elder Marcus turned and hurried back towards the village center. It was time to take action. The safety of Mubi depended on it. Back at the Okafor compound, Kioma was in a state of agitation. Where have those children gone? She muttered to herself as she aggressively kneaded dough for the day's bread. Disappearing without a word, just like yesterday. When I get my hands on them. Her muttering was interrupted by a knock at the compound gate. Wiping her hands on her apron, Kioma went to see who it was. To her surprise, she found Elder Marcus standing there, his face grave. "Good morning, Kioma," he said. "May I come in? I need to speak with you about your children." Kioma's heart sank. What trouble had Femi and Fumi gotten into now? "Of course, Elder," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "Please, come in. Can I offer you some palm wine?" As she led Elder Marcus to the shade of the mango tree, Kioma's mind raced. Whatever was going on, she knew it was serious. Elder Marcus rarely made house calls, and never without good reason. "Kioma," Elder Marcus began, his voice low and serious. "Have you noticed anything unusual about Femi and Fumi lately? Any strange behavior?" Chioma hesitated, thinking of Femi's unexplained absence the day before, and now both twins disappearing this morning. "They've been spending a lot of time at the river," she said cautiously. "But it's been so hot lately. I thought nothing of it." Elder Marcus nodded slowly. "I see," he said. "Kioma, I'm afraid I have reason to believe that your children may be involved in something dangerous. Something that could put the entire village at risk." Kioma felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean, Elder? What kind of danger?" Before Elder Marcus could respond, they heard voices approaching, Femi and Fumi, returning from the river. As the twins entered the compound, laughing and talking animatedly, they stopped short at the sight of Elder Marcus. "Femi, Fumi," Chioma said, her voice tight with worry. "Elder Marcus is here to speak with us. Come, sit down." As the twins exchanged a worried glance and took seats under the mango tree, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. The secrets of the river, the future of Mubi, and the fate of a forbidden love all hung in the balance.
Write the word "continue" in the comments section if you want the next part, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.